Hello and welcome back to another video. We are jumping straight into this inking. So this is a commission that I did just before Christmas. I was commissioned to do an A4 inking of this very large long-haired black dog. So I did a black dog just recently. I think it was a short-haired dog, and I went through kind of how I tackle doing short-haired very dark fur, and so I thought in this video we could tackle the dark long fur. So they do react different in some aspects, but in a lot of aspects it's much the same. So if you did watch that video, you may just want to build on your knowledge of that, and if you didn't watch that video, this is probably going to be a good basis for you to start on as well. But all in all, it is very similar. We tackle the dark fur in the same way. We look at the way the fur is moving, we look at the way the fur dips into grooves, into darker areas, and is also highlighted, because although the fur is very black, when the sun is shining on certain parts of the fur that are a bit higher or in the line of sight of any light source, then you will get lighter areas of fur. So you really need to pick up on that and get that down. So I think starting off, let's go from the sketch. When you are sketching this out, I use the grid method, which you may have seen in many other videos. I tend to try and map in where the dark spots are and where the light spots are. I don't just do the outlines of the different aspects of the dog and the different features. I try and add in little shapes here and there. I break things down to a shape. If I see a large white section of fur that's in the shape of a triangle, I will draw that in, and I will make sure that that is in there so that it makes my inking process a lot smoother. So that is your first tackling and jumping starting point, basically. So you want to do that, and then you want to jump in. So here I'm using my Bortoletti glass dip pen, but you can do anything. You can use an inking pen, a pigment liner, anything that you have to do this. I just like this because I can, I just use this all the time. But staying with one line variant, you can still do this exact same thing with that. So maybe I'll do a video on doing it with just a normal pen in the future. But as you can see here, so this is where I've marked in some lighter and darker areas. I'm looking at where the fur is curving around the ear. The ear is not a flat point. There are curves, there are dips, there are grooves in that. And I'm looking at this, and I'm inking around those curves and around those shapes, leaving areas that are a little bit lighter because some light is on them, and deepening those shadows. And as you can see, you can really get a good effect there, and you can see where all the little grooves are on that ear. So you really do need to pay attention, and I think sketching is the most important part of this, to just get those areas in, and also leaving your grid on. A lot of people rub the grid out once they've sketched it, but I leave it on because I can look at my reference photo and see within that small square that I've used to grid with, I can see there is a dark corner or there's a dark line in there, and I can use that to start inking as well as my sketch that's already down on the paper. So I think leaving that grid on and having a good sketch are the really good starting points and the base structure to a very good inking. I tend to do a light inking. I get my darks and I get my lights in there, but sometimes I will go on back into those areas. So you'll see me at the end, and I do cut a lot of that out because I don't want you to be watching a 10-hour video. But I do go back and I do darken areas. If I've darkened something else on the portrait elsewhere that I think should have been very dark, but when I compare it to something I inked prior to that and that's not dark enough and it should be on a comparable contrast, then I tend to go back in there and I tend to start kind of increasing the saturation of that shadow and to just to make it more cohesive as well. So I tend to do everything very light, and then I do go back and I do darken areas that I need to darken. As you saw, I started with the eye again. It is just my personal preference to start with an eye because I just feel it brings the portrait to life. Obviously you start with whatever point you want. I know some people start with like an ear, or they start from left to right or top to bottom. That is obviously personal preference, but I do really enjoy doing the eyes, and as you see in the pupils, I do cross hatch and I just build up. I do very, very light cross hatching, never over darken anything. You can always add on, but you can never take off. I'm sure that's the case for absolutely everything in life, with baking, with cooking, with artwork in general. You can always add on, but you can never take away. So just do everything with very light hand at first, and you can go in and darken that at a later stage. I think the real time here aspect of this segment of the video really shows how long it takes me to do these sorts of portraits. It's not a quick process. If you are looking to do a quick portrait, I'm not sure inking is the one for you. It is very time consuming, and it is very intense with the amount of detail you do need to add in. But like I have mentioned in other videos, you don't necessarily have to add every little strand of fur. It just so happens I'm using quite a fine line width, and so I do have to add in a lot of fur strokes. But I have shown in the past when I've done inked birds that you can mimic very light fur. You've seen when I've done a white dog, let's say, I've done very minimal strokes of fur, and it definitely highlights and shows that there's fur meant to be there, and you don't have to saturate. I think with a dark dog maybe you do have to saturate, but it's not always the case. So just kind of assess the dog or the pet, let's say, as a case by case, because sometimes you can get away with adding a lot less. I have done a Dachshund in the past, a sausage dog, and they had a very shiny coat, and I actually, on the very, very light areas where the sun was shining off their fur, I was able to just add very minimal amounts of lines and really show the impact of fur there, even though it was a dark dog. So you really need to just break this into lights and darks. A good thing to do, which I have mentioned in the past as well, is to actually desaturate your reference photo. Take all the colour out, make it black and white, and print it out. Have a look at the darks and the lights. Maybe try this with one little small, don't tackle one whole pet, maybe take an aspect of the pet like an ear or a nose and just focus on that one bit. They all take different skills to do the different parts of the pet, and maybe I will do that where I break down the different aspects, the way I do a nose, the way I do eyes, the way I do long and short fur, dark and light fur. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a session working on that to showcase it. But as you can see here, we move on to the very, very long fur, and it is just a case of making sure I'm leaving those lighter strands to show that there's long fur there, and then deepening around them, kind of to bring depth there. You've got fur on the surface and fur at the back. And then it's just a case of finishing this inking off. I hope that was clear enough. I know I sped through quite a lot there, so if there's any points that you do want me to run over in a bit more depth, I can do that. So just hit me up in the comments below and we will sort out some more in-depth tutorials for you. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.